Our topic? Does everybody know the topic? Does anybody know the topic? Our host knows the topic. The importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the topic. Just set it up on the microphone stand, we'll see what happens. Just, your time to figure it out is over. It's either going to work or not work. It's not working? Okay, just leave it, just leave it, just leave it. During Srila Prabhupada's time, it was a known standard whenever he would speak publicly, he wanted a full display of his books. And one of the messages to the audience was one of his favorite phrases, Krishna consciousness is authorized. That phrase was so important to him that he had the then ISKCON press publish a little book, Krishna consciousness is authorized. He wanted the world, and particularly he wanted the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, the shakers and movers and intellectuals of the world, to take this movement seriously, because he understood historically when persons in those two positions, the leaders who are administrators and the visionaries who are intellectuals, if they, to the degree that they accept these teachings, they can influence people a whole lot. So he wanted, much like Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted, the intellectuals, at least of the world, to know who was Lord Chaitanya and his teachings. And that was his mission to the Western English-speaking parts of the world, that people would understand Lord Chaitanya and his teachings. And so here you see there's a story behind the painting, or the photograph. There was a time when the devotees made a request, Prabhupada, on our altars in ISKCON, we'd like to have a photograph of you that you approve. And would you be okay with making that arrangement, or our making the arrangement for you? And immediately Prabhupada said yes, and he took it as an opportunity to instruct, as he did with everything that he did. So, I wasn't there, but I heard the description from a few different people who were there. One of them was outdoors and the other one was indoors. And the outdoors one, Prabhupada chose a big shade tree, and he stood right on the perimeter of the big shade tree, where his face was in the sun and to his back was the shade of the tree, which was good contrast. It was like artistic, very intelligent. And he dressed wearing just his uttariya over his shoulder, no kurta, dhoti, and danda, and stood very straight and looked very stern. The sadhu. And after doing that, he had told them he wanted a backdrop that was crushed purple velvet, And then he went and changed clothes and got bright silk, bright dark orange silk, and he went and changed clothes, and he came out, held his hand over his head like this, and turned around very slowly like a pirouette. And then instructed, for Krishna we can do anything. He was taking the opportunity to instruct. So one was standing before the crushed velvet, the other was sitting, as you see here, next to his publications. Because that was part of his mission. He wanted people to take it seriously. The message was different, and yet it was not different from whatever their tradition, whatever someone had convictions in. But it's very, 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 very detailed and profound. So when he spoke, it's supported by authority. If you perhaps recall, Bhakti Siddhanta, there's a similar, very serious pose, and on one of his lap, he's sitting cross-legged, and over here there's 3 large volumes. He has his hand on the 3 large volumes. So he's representing that wisdom that's within that literature. That's the message. So Prabhupada was very consistent. He had a vision. He had his intention, and an essential part of the culture, a spiritual culture, was books are the basis. So there's a few main points I want to make, and one of them is connected with what you see. This logo here is the logo of the GBC Strategic Planning. It's a drawing of a famous walk along Venice Beach where Prabhupada, with his head held high, tilted back a little bit like he would do, with his cane, moving forward. There's a shadow cast behind him. I mean, there was all the little parts of this are significant. And he's leading us. So in the corporate, I've been told, in the corporate world, strategic planning is a common phrase. So there's a GBC strategic planning group, and one of those parts, moving parts, is the Organization Development Committee. These are corporate terms, right? Yeah. So Organization Development Committee, OrgDev, called, and it has such importance that there's now not just an annual general meeting, the AGM, it's now twice a year, the midterm meeting, and the midterm meeting is almost entirely the GBC reviewing the work of the Organization Development Committee. It's a very important committee, and one of the projects taken up by that important committee was to study organizations over the centuries, religious organizations that have succeeded and failed, and why. So the person that took on the assignment, his name is Gaura Krishna, and he's the BBT in charge person, like Sobhas is for here in North America. He's that person for Russia. And his personality is a little cerebral, very intellectual. He took 3 years and he did essentially like a PhD paper on that question. And it was really comprehensive, and he studied, images of within Judaism, this group, that group, and the other group, one survived, but didn't survive, and Islam, this group, that group, the other group, and the leaders, and he really studied it thoroughly. And the different sects of Catholicism, because there's sects of Catholicism that didn't make it, and some that did, and so on and so on and so on. He really did a thorough job. And it took a while to understand, because English is not his first language, and it's, he's very abstract in his thought process. But it got distilled down and down and down, and eventually ended up in the following. It was called the Four Generations, or the Fading Acharya. And you can get an idea just from looking at the images. During Srila Prabhupada's lifetime, that was the first generation. So during Srila Prabhupada's lifetime, he was present, and any question about anything went to him, and he could instantly give an answer to whatever it was. And then after his departure, what was left was memories of Prabhupada and his disciples who remembered Prabhupada did this and Prabhupada did that, in this circumstance, that circumstance. And so that was the guidance for the current generation. And then you all are the third generation, and that's the disciples of his disciples, and then it becomes the disciples of his disciples. So that's the fourth generation. So the study, who made it and who didn't make it over a period of time, is now illustrated really simply here in this chart. So first to the fourth are vertical. So during the charismatic leader's presence, Muhammad or whoever, the whatever issues that could be resolved by the Acharya or the charismatic leader. He gave instructions. There were contexts to all the things that he gave instructions. In other words, sometimes this, sometimes that. And then behind it all was intention. And he knew his intention. Remember that phrase at the beginning, his vision, his intention. He knew, and he stated it. But not always were we so clear. There's this something that Prabhupada taught us, and somebody was asking me about it recently. We should, because I mentioned it during this past weekend, one should not predicate the mind of the spiritual master. Have you heard that one before? Predicate. It's like, the sentence, there's subject and the verb and the predicate. So in this case it's a verb. One should not predicate. That is, we're encouraged to understand the mood of the spiritual master, but not in each circumstance his intention was this, or his intention was that, or the other thing. Why did he speak this way? Why didn't he speak that way to another person, and so on and so on. It's not good to predicate the mind. So the intention was carried by the charismatic leader, in our case our founder Acharya. And then when he's gone, his intention is not moving the organization, but there are persons that understood his example and can, from context, could say we should do this or do that, or don't do this or don't do that. And then in all cases there's his instructions. And there were, even during Prabhupada's time, so we went through, there were issues and Prabhupada dealt with them, and he gave certain instructions, not just on how to deal with issues, but overall. And then now the present generation, the third generation, as the Prabhupada disciples leave, then this box down here doesn't work. The one next to instructions, we're not going to have those people that you can turn to say, what did Prabhupada do when such and such thing happened? You know, probably, different persons have a different perspective on the same situation. It happens presently. It happened during Prabhupada's time. So even the context was a little fuzzy with the second generation, but it's just not the same with the third generation. And then in the fourth generation, that's who comes after you, if they haven't read Prabhupada's books, then that's when the religious organization falls apart or becomes splintered and dissipates. So this is a very critical time, according to the study. And the study was, it took him 3 years. It took about 3 years to refine it. That is to say, it went before organization development, it went before the GBC, came back, and then it went to the gurus, GBCs and sannyasis, and then it came back, and it went out to the temple presidents, and it came back. But very simple. Something that I remember very well was Muhammad gave very strong emphasis on what he had written, like, his explanations of Quran, etc. And he didn't want biographies written about him because then it becomes anecdotal and it may lose the essence, which is in what he wrote. Now, with Prabhupada, there were his letters, his lectures, morning walk conversations, room conversations, and, people's exchanges with Prabhupada, and then the Prabhupada memories, and we did all those things. But that's not where the strongest is in his writings. Because when he was writing, he knew that for generations this is going to stand, because it was printed literature. So he was really careful with foundational types of statements that will withstand the test of time. So we'll say it a couple of different ways. The devotees in this room need to take very seriously, not that somebody or other who's the Brahminical person in the community, they read Prabhupada's books, but each of you should read Prabhupada's books. The responsibility rests with you to become conversant in Prabhupada's books, because if you don't, in the next generation, they won't be able to maintain the organization. We'll say it negatively. We, not so long ago, celebrated ISKCON 50. So if there's one thing that you can do, if you want to make sure that there is not ISKCON 100, don't read Prabhupada's books. That'll guarantee it. It won't last. And if you do read Prabhupada's books, not just the Brahmins and then you sit in the class and you hear from the Brahmins, but if you read Prabhupada's books, if the organization takes that instruction seriously, then good chance the organization will succeed. That's just what history shows. And history repeats itself. So this is called the 4 generations. There's certain things that are unknown in the subsequent generations. And all that's left in the 4th generation is issues. That divides people. So, what's the future going to look like? And those that are forward thinking, they understand the importance of maintaining that which our founder Acharya gave us through his instructions. Now there's various ways his instructions can come to us, but most important are his books. And he always gave emphasis to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Both. By Krishna and about Krishna. A second context of this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's description in Krishna Samhita and other places, where he discusses the pastimes of Krishna in Braja are performed specifically to help remove obstacles on the path of the devotee, and the path of Braja Bhakti specifically. And there's one pastime that's performed twice. That tells us it's significant, right? Like one verse in Bhagavad Gita that's spoken twice, same verse, almost. So there's one pastime, Krishna is swallowing the forest fire, that takes place twice. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's performed to remove the obstacle for the devotee, that tendency towards sectarianism. Because sectarianism is like a blazing forest fire that can destroy everything. Now you know the whole pastime, so here's some conclusion. Here's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu image Prabhupada wrote in teaching the Lord Chaitanya, so this was way back in 1966 or something like that, 67. Nimai Pandit was naturally a soft-hearted person, though strong in his principles. He declared that party feelings and sectarianism were the two great enemies of progress. So sectarianism and party feelings sometimes show their way in our Hare Krishna movement. Sometimes. And one of the best ways to prevent that from happening is very carefully read Prabhupada's books. There's other ways, but that's certainly a very essential way. Here's something that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote on this topic, Krishna Samhita. These are just excerpts from the introduction of that book. Sectarianism is a natural byproduct of the absolute truth. When acharyas first ascertain and instruct the truth, it is not polluted with sectarianism, but the rules and regulations received through disciplic succession regarding the goal and the method of achieving it changed in due course of time according to the mentality and locale of the people. A rule that is followed by one society is not necessarily accepted in another society. That is why one community is different from another. As a community gradually develops more respect for its own standards, it develops hatred towards other communities and considers their standards inferior. These sectarian symptoms are seen in all countries since time immemorial. Not a new thing. This is prominent amongst neophytes and found to some extent amongst Madhyama Adhikaris. Amongst Uttama Adhikaris, however, there is no trace of sectarianism. So one of the hallmarks that distinguishes the difference between these three stages is not the only one, but knowledge of the scripture. Yes? Here's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the first English edition of the Harmonist, 1927. Harmony, that's the title of the publication. Harmony is possible only when one has obtained a firm footing in the Dharma or the function of the soul. Although swan-like personalities may accept a particular practice from birth or childhood, according to instructions they have received, they nevertheless remain indifferent and non-sectarian. Those are swan-like persons. And then there's the other like persons, the crow-like persons. And the crow-like persons not only accept what they've learned, but they then, ours is better than yours. Exactly what Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying, he's, obviously the son heard from his father, and he understands and he's explaining from his own state of realization. So the harmonist is appealing to people, readers, to become swan-like. Or the Bhagavatam is encouraging us to become swan-like, Paramahamsa. Now, a Paramahamsa is very elevated, and so going the converse, before one becomes elevated, then there are these other tendencies. And other tendencies can be minimized by being grounded in Scripture. We'll say the same thing in a different way. For one of our essential teachings, along with books are the basis, is our authority structure in spiritual life in general is Guru Sadhu Shastra. Supposing somebody has an idea, like during the questions and answer discussion during this weekend, this Dhruva topic. There are different times, there are different things that were said by different people. So when you hear something, or something comes to your mind, either from someone else or directly from your thought process, you want to know, is it correct? Should I accept it or not? You hold it up to the light of Guru Sadhu Shastra. And if it doesn't stand that examination, you just discard it. And if it does, you can accept it. And then of those three, Guru Sadhu Shastra, the strongest is Shastra. Because Guru is the transparent medium for Shastra, and Sadhu, the transparent medium for Shastra. So the sun, the illumination is Shastra. Everything is resting on Shastra. Supposing you don't know Shastra, you just, you like serving, or you like prasadam, or you like, something. Then over there's a group of people that have this view, and over there's a group of people that have that view, and over there's a group of people that have another view, and you get confused. And you may gravitate towards one or the other, but you remain confused. So bhakti requires more than, it requires some feeling and some eagerness to serve and some sentiment for the process itself, but it needs intelligence to guide the process itself. And the intelligence comes to us. Krishna says, one who studies this sacred conversation is worshipping me with their intelligence. In this way, the intelligence becomes purified, and the intelligence becomes a spiritual intelligence that can guide all your activities. All your activities. And I added this one additional point, something I've repeated many times. Prabhupada said in Los Angeles, one sign of intelligence is the ability to hold opposing points within the mind. It's dramatic because the mind, like, the computer is a replica of the mind. It's a binary processor, and the mind is a binary processor. It's either a 1 or a 0. It's either a this or that, and it can't be both this and then that. If it's this, it's not that. If it's that, it's not this. That's the mind. And the intelligence is where one can hold two opposing points in the mind through the agency of intelligence. And if you don't have intelligence, you can't do that. It's either a 1 or a 0. I like it, I don't like it. So how do you, to sustain over a period of time your life in devotion There has to be spiritual intelligence directing your activity how to get to Krishna. And we're in a place of duality. And to get to the realm of that which is absolute, it's important, or it's necessary, to see this place of duality and its connection with Krishna. How to engage this and how to engage that properly for the pleasure of Krishna. Now, some things we just stay away from. That's how to engage it. There's lots of things we just stay away from. And, you know, I never tire of being amazed. And riding in a car and seeing that this side and that side, everything that's sinful. I mean, most things, many things. The eating places and the drinking places and the, you know, how people are indulging themselves. In a nation that's founded in, you know, in God we trust. And without elaborating, it's sad. It's not found within their scriptures. They're without going into it too much, there are strong Christian groups that are strictly vegetarian for a reason, because that's what the teaching is. And others that despite the teaching, they're abundantly engaged in sinful activities with meat eating and alcohol and other forms of intoxication, you know, the newer and different ones, as much as possible. So even good people can become corrupted if they're not clear. And, you know, the next generation, your children, are they going to continue in Krishna consciousness or not? And is the Hare Krishna movement going to continue in their custody? We'll have to see. But one of the ways that will be to help ensure that longevity and the vitality of sadhu sangha is not just having kirtan, of course having kirtan, but not just having kirtan. There has to be significant emphasis on systematically studying Prabhupada's books. The last time I was asked to speak on this topic specifically was, I'm just going to share, was in Beijing. And it was a room full of maybe 150 people. Beijing's a big city with its capital, and it has the, you know, a very large devotee population here and there, you know, spread throughout the city. So that was the topic, and we discussed the topic for 2.5 hours. I mean, I didn't do the same thing I'm doing here because it's a different audience. But, you know, fortunately, they got it. Not everybody in the room got it, and not everybody in the room is seriously studying Prabhupada's books. But enough people got it and had already gotten it that I felt it was real. I'm glad we spent that 2.5 hours. And it got down to, you know, practical things of how they can systematically study Prabhupada's books. So it's one thing to read, and it's good. You have to read. What Vaisheshika Prabhu has done with this chapter a day. Is anybody here doing the chapter a day? Chad? Nobody? Okay. You know what it is? You know what it is. Okay. Chapter a day. He has an acronym. CH, chapter a day. AD, Chad. So it's all over the world, and he has people sign up from all over the world. They have committed for 1 year to read Bhagavad Gita 1 chapter a day. Not just the verses. But, you begin somewhere. And you recite the verses 1 chapter a day, every day. And what happens? Your reading habit becomes a habit. And the message starts to go inside. And it's not just notional, but it starts to go inside. And then you start to see in terms of the message. Just by regular. One of Prabhupada's phrases is, you do something regularly and it becomes second nature. And I thought about that a lot because he said it a lot. So we have whatever our nature is, we're conditioned souls. We're conditioned by the modes of nature. But if you practice at something, it becomes your second nature. It replaces the conditioned one. So choose wisely something, the things that you do regularly, and it replaces the conditioned nature. It becomes whatever that thing is that you chose to do. Just by practice. Just by practice. So the behavior then affects, spiritual behavior affect consciousness, and consciousness becomes cleansed, and higher consciousness results, and it just becomes your way of life. Second nature. Whatever it might be, cleanliness, regulation, manner of speaking. So, reading regularly. He has this other little card that says, if you want to complete Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 years, here's how many verses you need to read every day. If you want to complete Srimad Bhagavatam in 2 years, here's how many. So you can calibrate. Just like our Bhakti Shastri. There's some Bhakti Shastris in the fast lane, and there's some Bhakti Shastris kind of, in the slow lane, and there's some that's in the middle lane. But, so there's reading, there's next level up is discussing, like many of you all are doing in your Bhakti Vriksha groups, and the next level up is you actually have a teacher, and the teacher is trained, because they were taught, and then they do the training in systematic study of Prabhupada's books. I know somebody that's now a Bhakti Shastri teacher, but before they became a Bhakti Shastri teacher, they took Bhakti Shastri course 7 times. So that they were ready. It's not like they were feeling nervous, they just wanted to be ready to deliver its message, and that person now is a really, really, really capable, heart-moving, consciousness-moving teacher. It's not just because that person read a lot. They studied under teachers and teaching different systems, so that it went in. And so, when you do that, even once, I like going into the subject matter in depth, as you experience with this Dhruva topic, and for me it was very enlivening. And the next place that I'm going to do the first 6 parts again. And the next place I'm going after that, I'm going to do the first 6 parts again. And I've already done it once in China. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So it's going to go in. More than just, hey, that was really inspiring, let me see how I can apply it. So there's some value in hearing very carefully, and discussing in the association of others, especially where there, because a teacher is not just information, there's a relationship. So, carefully studying Prabhupada's books under a teacher. I don't know what systems you have in place here, I'm sure there's some, but when your time permits, link up with those systems that are available. There's online ones, you can go at your own pace, and there's some that go fast, some that are medium, some that go slow, but it will enrich your life internally. It will help you in your family situations, in your work situation, in your coping with life situations. It'll help you be a good member of the community and help you make sure that we cross the ISKCON 100 line. And many of us are not going to be around to experience that. But some of you hopefully will be, and your children hopefully will be. So back to that 4 generations. It's imperative for ISKCON 100 to happen. Take the challenge seriously. Along with one final thing, there's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave special emphasis to chanting. And that's the Yuga Dharma. So it has a very special place. His Shikshastaka, it's explicitly about chanting. It starts with chanting, in the middle it's chanting, in the end it's chanting. It's just the fruit of chanting without offense, is Braja Prem. That's chanting awakens, is Braja Prem. At the same time, the same purification, just like Chaita Darpana Marjanam, the mirror of the mind becomes cleansed through chanting, we find the same foundational teaching with regard to Srimad Bhagavatam. Shrinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyantakstoya Bhadrani Vidhunoti Sariksatam. The heart becomes cleansed just by hearing this message. When seriously heard and chanted, it cleanses the heart. And it awakens bhakti. And it gives direction to our activity. So here's Srila Prabhupada's statement. A train moves on 2 tracks. If one track is missing, the train will derail and capsize. It won't get to its destination. Similarly, to make progress in spiritual life, 2 things, the 2 tracks of the train. One is that which makes the heart pure, and that which directs the activities of the pure heart. Because if you don't have the direction, the experience or the development can be sentimentality, undirected sentimentality, or misdirected becomes fanaticism or this sectarianism. And then the other is there's knowledge without the heart that's pure, is just dry philosophy. My experience, in one of my experiences in China is when I explain that the messages of Bhagavad Gita, it's really common. They say, this sounds like Buddhism. So wisdom, my answer is, wisdom is universal. Wisdom is wisdom is wisdom is wisdom. So you'll find much similarity in different spiritual teachings. But where does it take you? And if you don't have that scriptural reference, where does it take you in Buddhism? Nothing. Nothingness. And this wisdom takes one to a life of transcendental bliss and knowledge eternally. So the teachings of Bhagavatam are most important, and Bhagavad Gita most important, along with chanting. So although chanting is the Yuga Dharma, side by side, strong emphasis Prabhupada placed upon his books. Books are the basis. Purity is the force, books are the basis. So there's some thoughts on this evening's topic. There's so many other things to say, but let's see if there's some thoughts or discussion. Yeah. There's no microphone, you just have to speak. Yeah.
The ability to hold two opposite views in the mind, is it same as tolerating the duality? Like how Krishna mentions.
It's more than that. It's that, but it's more than that. Tolerating the dualities is not this. When there's intelligence, one certainly can tolerate dualities, but this is more than tolerating dualities. Let's do an example from our past time together. I'm still exploring with further authorities to see if they have an explanation. So the undifferentiated Brahman and that verse that says there's energies within the undifferentiated Brahman, knowledge in the ignorance, etc. Those are two opposites. So both are stated. So it's not one's right, if this one's right, the other one's wrong, and vice versa. So that's not a duality thing, that's a contrasting teaching. Or Prabhupada, Prabhupada, for me, I still want to keep pursuing it and try to see if there's some resolution. And I've been too busy to get to it yet. But Svetadweep and Dhruvaloka are the same. And then there's other references to say they're not the same. They're like in the sense that they're spiritual planets, but they're not the same. So are they the same or not the same? That's this.
Is it connected to Achintya Veda, Veda Tattva?
It's yes, it's connected. It's not the essence of Achintya Veda Veda Tattva is a little different, but it's similar. Achintya Veda Veda Tattva says that there's a relationship of oneness of all things with the source, but one thing is the source and the other was emanated from the source. So there's a oneness and there's a difference. One's the energetic and the other's the energy. In different varieties. Yes.
Maharaj, wonderful point and a very nice lecture. One point struck to me, Maharaj, was where you said that how in fourth generation the teaching of the Acharya is lost. And then I was thinking that if we see this teaching is actually being passed on through parampara system. So how do we understand this? If we see we are called Rupanugas, right? So we are following the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through
Rupa Goswami, yeah.
Yeah. So is the teaching lost?
It depends if you read Prabhupada's books or not.
Exactly. So
It's one thing to say, I'm a follower of Rupa Goswami. It's another thing to be a follower of Rupa Goswami. And some individuals may think that they're followers, but they don't even know what he said. And they think they know what he said. There are devotees that are very advanced. And those devotees that are very advanced will readily say, people don't really know what Prabhupada has written in his books. And therefore, there's so much turmoil within an individual, not even between individuals. Unnecessary. They just don't know. And it's there. So teachers have the responsibility of pointing out what's there, but also encouraging persons to read so they know what's there. Both. So your question is, are the teachings lost? Well, they're in the books. This is another Prabhupada story. You probably heard that one of the most joyful moments in Prabhupada's life was when new books were received. Everything would stop, and he'd take the book, examine the book, and just get absorbed in the book. And it wasn't for show. That was his heart. And one time when this happened, he was looking, and he stopped, looked around the room, and said, one day, there may be no temples. One day, there may be no devotees, but there will always be my books. So, that was his heart's expression in a moment of contemplating how important his books were. But he didn't want us just to distribute them. He wanted us to distribute them like anything. But he wanted us to read them. During these periods of time, when the expansion of book distribution was going on, he had us in temples have 3 classes a day. We were having morning and evening class, and then nectar devotion. It didn't stay for too long. But when nectar devotion came out, he said we should have a class in the middle of the day just in nectar devotion. Bhagavatam morning, Bhagavad Gita evening, and nectar devotion in the middle part of the day. We did it for a long time. He wanted us to read and know what's in his books. And then another instruction was, if you don't understand something in nectar devotion, read it again. And if you don't understand after reading it again, read it again. And after reading again and again, eventually you'll understand. He just made it so simple. But he wanted us to understand. He wanted us to read as much as it, read and read and read to understand. And then continue to read, because then it goes in. And it becomes the place from which you're living your life is what his books are, because they went in. And then you're a follower of Rupa Goswami. And before that is notional. And the mind goes over here, and the mind goes over there, thinking, I'm a follower of Rupa Goswami. Oh, no, I'm a follower of Rupa Goswami. It goes on. Someone else had their hand up. Yes?
Maharaj, are there a few things we can keep in mind which will inspire us to study Srila Prabhupada's books in our day-to-day lives?
I've been trying to do that this whole evening. Go back and listen. That's to keep in mind the emphasis that he gave. And why? He wanted us to understand. He wanted to give to us the boat by which we can cross the ocean of material existence. So he provided it in his books. Assiduously and prolifically he wrote. He worked very hard to, in the midst of everything and everything, to give his books, because that would live beyond his lifetime. So we can access him beyond his lifetime through his books. And one can palpably feel his presence through when one becomes immersed in his writings and teachings, and that means you get immersed in him. There's a potency, a bhakti shakti that you can experience, without which there's the other alternative, the struggle alternative, where you're doing your best and you're struggling a lot. So we don't like the struggle. And Krishna doesn't like to see us struggle, he likes to see us happy and well situated. So these are all these things this evening, there's some simple points to remember. The Krishna connection is made. Srinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyantaksto Yabhadrani Idoloti Saritsatam Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So there it is. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam literally means always, but regularly. Bhagavata Sevaya. And it's seva to the book Bhagavad, to receive it and read it. And one's life can change. Yeah.
I have one more. What's your opinion, Gurmaraj, on...
Opinion.
Yes, or what do you feel about reading just the translations versus reading with Srila Prabhupada's books?
I know what Prabhupada said about it, and not my feeling, I know what Prabhupada said about it. He said, you won't understand.
If you just read them.
Yeah, you won't understand. There's two Prabhupada stories on this. Well, the stories are nice. The teaching is embedded in the story. There was a period of time when Prabhupada was experimenting with following his spiritual master, having ISKCON having its own printing press. And so he wanted a printing press. So the devotees bought a printing press. And there was a devotee named Advaita who was in charge of the press. And he shared this with me, that he had asked Prabhupada, is it okay to print a little pocketbook, Bhagavad Gita, you can fit in your pocket, and from time to time you pull it out and you just study the verse, and then put it back in your pocket. It's really convenient. And it wasn't before there was digital anything. So Prabhupada said no. And his explanation was, the different Bhagavad Gitas, they don't so much differ in the translation, they differ in the commentary. Because that's where the understanding is of the Bhagavad Gita, the commentary. So without the Bhaktivedanta purports, people won't understand the meaning. So he said no. Now, some time passed and now they have just the verses in the book. But I know what Prabhupada said. However, just reciting the verses, there's potency in the verses, and chapter a day is just the verses, and it gets people in the mood of reading, in a habit of reading. And then, hopefully, they'll want to go and say, what does it mean that I just learned? Or I've been reading. And then it'll encourage them, but something that's doable, chew a little bit before you eat the whole meal. Yes.
Hare Krishna. So I'm a little nervous in asking this question. But I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Good.
I just want to know, how can we spread Srila Prabhupada's teachings in a way that is loving rather than forceful and righteous?
by being loving rather than forceful and righteous. It's character. If you have good character, you won't be forceful and righteous. And if you have teachers that are loving, it'll help you become more loving instead of forceful and righteous. So associate with people like that. And then you'll become like that. And then your behavior, conduct, and speech will be like that. Regularly, one of my phrases that I repeat over and over is, don't whack people with the stick. You know, I know better than you do. You know, don't do that. Don't do that. Because you're blessed with some knowledge, feel grateful with a soft heart, and then I wish to share this in a way that's palatable and acceptable and sensitive. So that's how you should do it. But it takes character to do that, because otherwise, if you don't have character, and it's not just spiritual teachings, it's life. Anything. Academics, in school, or sports, in young people and old people and all around. So, you can be a gentleman in a refined lady, or you can be a, bully. And there's, takes all kinds. You don't have to be a bully. But there are such things. It's character. You cultivate that character, and that's what you'll do. And associate with those that have that character. Teachers that have that character. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Chanting, reading scriptures, and the devotional service, what we do, go hand in hand.
Yes.
So, it is like a self-made roadblocks, I can say, sometimes due to prioritization or the self-made thoughts that, whatever we do as a service, that may overtake the other. Like sometimes chanting will be down, or sometimes, or most of the times even reading.
But there's teachings on how to prioritize. And service is down here, and sadhana is up here. The story, one story, is one devotee had pneumonia. And during Prabhupada's time, pneumonia meant they put you literally in an oxygen tent. They didn't have masks, they just had this plastic thing, and you're inside a oxygen tent. I don't know what they have these days, for sure, but... So Prabhupada went to visit them. And they were like, wow, Prabhupada came to see me in the hospital. And they said through the oxygen tent, Prabhupada, I can't breathe. So it's really difficult to chant. And I made a vow to chant, and I can't chant because I can't breathe. And Prabhupada then said, that's okay, you can, as much as you can chant in your mind. And first comes health, and as health permits, you'll be able to again chant. And then again, when your chanting has become restored, you'll be able to do some service. That's your priority. Very simple. However, as you just expressed, sometimes people flip it upside down. They do so much service, it deteriorates their health, and sadhana gets pushed to the side, or squeezed at least. And then some other things start to happen. Their spiritual strength depletes, they get an anxiety, they get, short and curt and improper in their dealings with others. Initially there's some regret, and then after some time it just becomes, regular business. And it has to do with not having proper, part of it is not having proper priority. So, service the premise of your statement, a preamble, chanting, reading, and service. But it's actually, and they go well together, but it's actually the service is supported by the reading and the chanting. The result of reading is service. The result of chanting is service. As we're saying, Krishna, please engage me in service. And then comes the service. Not the other way around. Now, some people don't have attraction. There are categories of persons. They're not attracted to chanting and they really like service. So there's a place for them. But that then is not full strength. So the acharyas are teaching us, the scriptures are teaching us the importance of, yes, the importance of service, but service where the heart is pure and guided by scripture.
And the follow-up question, Maharaj.
Yeah.
If the service is, we spoke about it, it should be related or connected to Krishna. And again, if it is a self-made option, like, or it is a forced upon option, I can say. We can say like few services will be related or few services will be self-made. Oh, I'm doing this for Krishna, but it is a forceful. How do you differentiate? And that will eat up. There are certain practical situations which we are doing in temple right now, which is coming from the forceful action on it, and it is a service towards. The question here is, do we have to take everything which comes on us as a service, which is related to Krishna, or we can differentiate that?
I heard like 3 or 4 different things. I'm not sure. If it's just the last part, that is to say, I'm in a community of devotees, in the temple and in the community and here and there, and there's so many varieties of service, and I may be approached to do some of those so many varieties of service. Is it okay to be selective about, I'm really inspired to do this kind and not as inspired to do that kind, so I choose to say yes to this and a polite, if I have time I'll do some of the other ones, which is a polite no. Is that okay? That's your question.
Yeah, that's okay. And also another second question is, we will be going into a judgmental mood.
We means that someone will be judging us, or we'll be judging ourselves?
We will be judging ourselves. And
well, who's to be pleased? That's, we each of us have our psychophysical nature. Some people are good at accounting. Some people good at singing. Some people good at deity dressing. Some people good at this thing, and some people good at thatting. So that which we have a nature that's inclined to do, a good manager will see inclination and encourage somebody according to inclination. And similarly, we should see our inclination and accept those things that match our nature. And there's some things that I recognize, let's say pot washing. There's some things that I may recognize, this will be good for me. It's not like yummy, but it'll be good for me. And for these reasons. And so I accept it, not because it's yummy, I accept it because it's going to help me in a way that's important for me. So you have responsibility in saying, just keeping it simple, saying yes or no thank you. It's your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to say yes to everything and then you burst because you don't have time for anything because you're too busy saying yes to everything. So you have to have some boundaries, and when you're personally drawing your boundaries, it's good to bear in mind things that are natural and things that are in the category of purifying, and because of that it's a little uncomfortable, but it's good to do some of those things. It's not my cup of tea, or it's not my nature, but it's good for me. So I do some of those things too. But all of that is resting on, the service is resting upon the strong foundation of hearing and chanting, and that is not to be compromised. Now, to say that's not to be compromised, there's always circumstances, let's say a Janmashtami festival or something or other, and the services go through the ceiling. And so you may have a plan B when that time is going on. It's like at work. There's a deadline for something and everyone's running around crazy at work to get the deadline met, whatever goes on in the workplace. So there may be, the exceptional, but as far as possible stay with the plan A. Sadhana-wise, there's a core set of things that are important for my ongoing sustainable Krishna consciousness and progress in Krishna consciousness, and to keep that in place even when it gets busy. It's doable. Anyone else? We're done?
I have another follow-up, but not related to this matter. One of the questions, the answer was between Shvetadvip and Dhruva Loka. The question is, in a higher planets, there are certain scriptures which are being yesterday we were having Bhakti Vaibhav, one of the second canto, first chapter, 35th verse, and so we see in connection with Krishna's Virat Roop to see everything, which is there in this Bhuloka right now. So the question here is, like we see as a rivers, like a hair, like a cloud, sky, and all, like those kind of resemblances which have been spoke about. How is it done in the higher planets? Like in Brahmalok, let us say, there should be some kind of if I'm staying in a Brahmalok, is there any connection to the scriptures that way we can make?
Why not? Why would you even question it?
So the scriptures are similar.
Well, the universal form is the universal form is the universal form. It doesn't matter where you are. It's the universal form. According to my study of Brahma Samhita, each morning there's a partial annihilation, and each morning when Brahma wakes up, his service is to recreate that part of the universe that was destroyed during the partial devastation. And one of the things that he does is he immerses his thought in the universal form so he knows how to reconstruct it.
Then how can you see in planets, like other planets, like even moon or sun, there will be a life, right? How will you connect that?
I'm not Brahma. I don't know how you connect it. But, the universal form is the universal form.
So there will be equivalent universal form in those planets?
Well, it's not that there's a universal form of those planets. There's a universal form, and they meditate on the universal form. The universal form is the form of the universe. It's not in this planet, not in that planet, and not in another planet, or a different universal form. The universal form is the universe. It's a form of the universe. it's a bit of a mystery. Is it or isn't it? That's part of the mystery. Is it imaginary or is it real? Well, it's real, but it's not permanent, and therefore it's imaginary. But it's a form that one may meditate on. As you read the chapter 1 very carefully, you'll see, and you go into chapter 2, it reflects back. It's to help one form a conception of God as a person when all one can relate to is matter. I have no experience of God as a person, I have experience of matter. So I meditate on God having form through matter. That's the function of meditation on the universal form. So what the experience of that is for Brahma, what the experience is for you when you read Canto 2, Chapter 1, may not be the same, but it's the same universal form. It's the same universe and the form of the universe. So this is off topic.
Yeah, sorry.
And it's not easy to understand. That's for sure. You have something?
Yes, Maharaj. It is general, nothing to do with but about the books. Emphasis is always there to read Prabhupada's books.
Good.
There are so many books.
Yes.
Is there any GBC has any opinion about some Swamis have written 50 books, 60 books? I mean, how do we handle that kind of thing?
I know how I handle it.
That would be helpful.
Well, I read Prabhupada's books almost exclusively. I do read other things. I read commentary connected to the Bhagavatam, what has been translated. And I have come to know some of those translations need refinement, meaning, that's kind of quick and not with the same gravity as the Bhaktivedanta purports. You follow? That's from Devamrita Maharaj, because he is concerned, one of his concerns is the work of Bhanu Swami was done quickly and not necessarily with the same gravity as the Bhaktivedanta purports. Now he's just making translation of commentary, but it's not done as meticulously as was done during Prabhupada's time. Now he's a wonderful soul, and I value his work, but so primarily it's Prabhupada's books. Now, all these other books and all these other books and all these other books, I don't read them. People gift them to me, I put them in my bookshelf. Thank you. And it goes on my bookshelf. And occasionally I'll become familiar with something. It just happened. I became familiar with Ramayana, and I learned there's so many authorized versions of Ramayana. So I became familiar with the diversity that's out there. But it's right at the very beginning of Sukadeva Goswami speaking those 3 chapters about Ram in Canto 9. I'm only going to speak the authorized ones. Meaning even during his time there were many that were not authorized, and many that were. And that was what he was speaking. So, gosh. I like Keshava Bharati Maharaj, you know him?
Yeah, I heard about him.
You've heard about him? He's got blinders on. He did editing for Shivram Maharaj's books, because they're friends. So he wrote so many, amazing books. And he was the principal editor. And he was the editor for Gopi Pranadhana's books. He was part of a team of editors. I forget, some number of books. He shared this with me. Over these many years, I was the editor of so many books. I've come to the point where I only want to read Prabhupada's books. I don't read these other books. The only other book that I read is Gopi Pranadhana's books because I know his fidelity to Prabhupada. And I know that too from my interactions with him. Without details, there's details. But he's so fastidiously loyal to Prabhupada in his writings and his everything. Now he's departed, but I have all confidence in anything that he has presented in terms of his transparency with Prabhupada. Very, very, very strong in that department. So, I'm not quite like Keshav Bharti Maharaj, but kind of in that direction. That's how I deal with these so many books. Thank you, and it goes on my shelf. Now, one day, personally, I'd like to study the Sandarbhas. Because, Jiva Goswami is... But how to get that? So, Gopi has written. He didn't complete, but the part that he has written, I'd like to one day just spend some serious time and dive deeply into the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami and discuss with people that have similarly done that. So there are not so many scholarly people like that. But, that's with the strong foundation in Prabhupada's writing. Now, bridge literature is good. It helps people that you give them one of Prabhupada's books, they're not going to read it. So it's something that helps them get to the bhakti message, so they can get to the point of reading Prabhupada's books. It's kind of like this, just read the verses without the purports. That's me. So I don't know about you, but that's me. Everything we need to... Prabhupada said, in this first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, everything you need to know to go back to God is in the first canto. That's what he brought with him. And his purports in the first canto are so powerful. Yeah. So, and that's the lotus feet of Krishna. You have the lotus feet of Krishna, you got Krishna. Now, you can gradually work your way up to his smiling face, but you're with Krishna in Canto 1. If you can't be with Krishna in Canto 1, you're not going to be with Krishna with a smiling face.
Should we try to memorize what we... I find it helps me if I memorize and reflect.
Sure. I mean, everybody...
Important, or I just read with intent and go ahead?
I don't do a lot of memorization, but that's me. The verses that I know, it's just from hearing them again and again and again and again. It's not from attempting to memorize. On the other hand, there are some devotees. The more you go in that direction, the more your memory becomes stronger. Not just remembering a particular verse or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20, but the memory of verses becomes stronger.
But does it help in
Of course it helps.
cleansing the heart?
Yes. But it helps you remember Krishna. That's only possible if your heart is clean. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Romapada Swami Maharaj ki jai.